Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Weighing In. We have an extraordinarily spicy episode for you this week. But I'm Josh, and I'm joined by my constant co-host, Ollie. How are you doing today, Ollie?
I'm very good, thank you. Josh, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. Very excited to talk about this week's games because we've had so many matches to talk about with both LCS and LEC in their playoffs. We're having best of five games, pumping out so many matches, and the LCK finishing this week. We have so much to talk about. It's going to be a jam-packed episode.
Yeah, and it's going to be an exciting one as well. There's been
Yeah,
some upsets this week, some favoured teams winning, but some really exciting games. So,
there's been a little bit of everything this week. There really has.
mm,
And so, without further ado, to stop this episode from being incredibly long, we are going to simply talk about the news that came out this week, which we alluded to on last week's episode. But it has been confirmed um, that Lilia will be enabled for Worlds as it has been enabled in other regions. But the other new champion that came out, Yone, who arguably people were more excited for, will not be at Worlds this year.
yeah, and I think this is probably a good choice. I'm not 100% sure on it because I know lots of people have been playing it a lot in solo queue. I know Nemesis from Fnatic's been playing it a lot, and so has Faker. Faker's been pretty much spamming it in solo queue on his streams. So it's interesting to see whether he'll actually even be playing for T1 if they make it to Worlds here.
It definitely will be, and we're going to have a deep dive into T1 later because their storylines were phenomenally interesting this week.
Yes, indeed.
But first, to talk about arguably uh, the one of the most interesting leagues that's going on at the moment is the LCS. They are in their second week of playoffs. This week we saw both upper bracket semi-finals take place, and directly following those, the losers round two games, which are elimination matches, take place with the losing teams from those semi-finals dropping down into them. And we have some really, really interesting games to talk about.
Yeah, and the
So,
first game this week for the playoffs was FlyQuest vs Cloud9. Now, what are your thoughts on this best of five, Josh?
so coming into this, I really didn't know how to feel because Cloud9, up to the second half of the summer split, have been by far the best team in North America. No one's come close. And I don't know what's happened to this team. It just seems like things aren't clicking. And when you compare that to FlyQuest's trajectory, constantly getting better, even benching Wild Turtle during the split, he's come back looking so good. This team just seems to be getting better and better. And so it was a tale of two storylines. We wanted to see, with Cloud9 having a week off, FlyQuest having to play against EG last week, we wanted to see if Cloud9 could come back and actually perform at the level that we've seen from them this year. And I have to say, it was another really disappointing game from Cloud9. And FlyQuest came away with a win here, 3-1 against Cloud9. And it just felt so disappointing, not to detract from FlyQuest, of course, because they looked incredible. But I don't know what's happened to Cloud9. I really don't.
Yeah, and like you said, Wild Turtle coming back and playing really well in the playoffs. You have to give credit to Wild Turtle here, but you have to also look at Sven and wonder, is he a top 3 ADC in the LCS anymore? I mean, I heard a quick interview with Doublelift after the TSM games today saying that he was more worried about FBI than he was of Sven in their
Yeah.
upcoming best of five, and to be honest, I have to give it to him.
Yeah, 100%. And it felt very weird. And I wanted your opinion on that because we look at Sven, we look at his performance coming up before this best of five, and he was one of the strong points for this Cloud9 lineup. And I don't know if Cloud9 had the wrong read on the meta or if Sven is really struggling that much, but they picked Ezreal Yumi in the
Yeah.
first round of picks every time, regardless of the side they were on, giving away both Ashe and Senna.
Yeah. And for me, I think this really is something that's quite disappointing to see them going with the Yumi. I think Yumi in the current state is just not a good pick for support, especially, I mean, we've seen it work with Ezreal before, but I think Yumi right now is just not as strong as she was, and people know how to deal with her better. And if your ADC is not playing as well as he possibly can, then Yumi cannot perform to her best, and that's why I think here we saw Sven not performing to his best, and Vulcan, as a result of that, not being able to perform to his best.
Yeah, definitely. It was very strange, and I don't understand why there was so much priority on the Ezreal Yumi combo, because I would have happily seen Sven on something a little bit more lane dominant to really push the advantage which we know he can have. And it just, the fact that you're constantly picking that defensive bot lane
Mm.
makes me question as to Sven's confidence in himself, which is really worrying because a team that's been so dominant all year, if you're losing confidence at this point, this close to qualifying for Worlds, that doesn't fill me with any sort of hope for this team.
Yeah, neither for me. I think they have to kind of look at their themselves and see Sven. We know he's a great AD carry. Get him on those carry champions who can dominate the lane. Like anyone pretty much apart from apart from a Yumi support can dominate the lane. If he was to pick up something like the Caitlyn, I know Caitlyn was banned in pretty much all the games here, but any other AD carry like Ashe, Ashe is a really lane dominant champion, especially
Mm.
against the picks that Wild Turtle likes to go for, like these Sennas, and
Yeah,
seeing him on any of those champs with something like a Nautilus support, Nautilus is a really strong safe pick rather than the
and,
Yumi.
and we've seen how good Vulcan can be on the engaged sports, such as Nautilus.
Exactly, and even maybe a stronger support, like if you're going for a really aggressive bot lane, something like the Blitzcrank or the Fresh, we know he can hit those hooks, and it's just disappointing to see that they stuck with that defensive bot lane, not trying to like push their lead, etc.
Yeah, it wasn't like Cloud9 got necessarily didn't get the picks that they wanted every time. Like Cloud9 were able to get drafts that I think that they were pretty happy with every game. In the
Yeah,
first game, had you had the TF for Niski, his signature pick, um, and you had Licorice on his comfort pick of Vlad, like pocket comfort pick of Vladimir to help out in those side lanes with the TF, you know. And that was and you think those are kind of signature Cloud9 champions, but that was the fastest win out of all of them for FlyQuest. And then, you switch over, you give Blabber Lee Sin twice, and he just doesn't look great on it.
no.
He was better in the one win that they had in game two, but even still, it just it seems like this team doesn't know what works for them anymore.
Yeah, and I agree with Blabber not performing in the series, super disappointing on his Lee Sin. But you have to give it to Santorin here with the MVP in this series, looking incredible in the
Yeah,
jungle.
100%. And it definitely felt like um, Santorin had prepared the Lilia,
Yeah,
and
Vada.
and then Cloud9 just didn't know what to do against it because I think they banned it every game after the first one
Yeah,
because
which
Santorin had such an incredible performance. And Santorin says, "Eh, you know what? I'll just go and then I'll play my Volibear twice, and I'll play um the Graves, which you've seen him be absolutely monstrous on. This
exactly.
guy, this guy literally can play any of the meta junglers from any of the meta styles. He just seems so strong, and like I think he's a lot of FlyQuest's objective control at the moment, which has been so good. It allows them to get the early control on Drakes and just keep snowballing the game.
Yeah, and I think one thing that makes Santorin an amazing jungler, especially I'd say definitely top three in the LCS at the moment, looking super strong. One thing that I think it makes him really good is he's really hard to ban out. Like you said, he picked Lilia, Volibear, and Graves in this series. Three completely different style of junglers. You've got Lilia who just wants to full clear until level 6 and is really good at that. You want Graves who is going to be looking for those early ganks, and Volibear as well, who's always looking for a level 3 gank.
Yeah, and it is so telling when you just think about how the series went. In all three games that FlyQuest won, they secured Dragon Soul in every single one, and they had a Elder Dragon in the last one. In the third and fourth games, Cloud9 didn't get a single dragon.
Yeah, and that
That's so telling to the disparity that you never would have expected.
yeah, exactly. And you have to look at Blabber and think why. I mean, you can't put it solely on him for not getting those Drakes, especially in early games. It's hard to secure Drake if your bot lane doesn't have prio. So you have to kind of think about that, especially. And again, it falls back to the question of why did they pick Yumi Ezreal in every game?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, it just feels like maybe the mismatch in priority wasn't there, but like the bans seem a little bit strange. You know, it's Cloud9 on blue side banning Caitlyn,
Yeah, and
who's the
that to me
strongest
was
AD carry at the moment, and that's what really like is really worrying because when you're using two of your bans on Santorin, like let's say the last game, yeah, they
mm,
used two bans on Santorin, which they're always banning Lilia against him after the first game.
yeah.
They banned the Graves because he was so monstrous in the third game, and then they're banning Caitlyn on blue side. It just feels like you've given up your first three bans and gained absolutely nothing from them.
Yeah, and you've tried to ban out Santorin, but you know he has other pocket picks, which is
Yeah,
just super weird choice. And the banning of Caitlyn, they could have got that first pick, and like you said, the probably the strongest ADC at the moment, the
yeah.
highest win rate. It's just super weird stuff, and you have to look at their decision making here and wonder why they're doing it. You know,
It
it's
just
some kind of miscommunication or something because I feel like 9 times out of 10 you're not banning, you're waiting for Fly to see if they ban that Caitlyn, otherwise you're just first picking it every single time.
yeah, and it's so strong at the moment. I don't understand why you're not willing to first pick it, and I think that brings us back around to the point where we say, how confident is Ven at the moment? Can he play the Caitlyn at all?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question, but then again, I mean we've seen him play carry-oriented champs before, and Caitlyn, to be frank, is not a hard champion to play and to carry with, especially if you're mechanically gifted like Sven is, I would say. I
Yeah.
mean, and Caitlyn is not a hard champ to be able to pick up, and it's just really worrying, like you said, to see him not even be confident in himself to pick up something like the Caitlyn.
Yeah. And obviously we have to preface this. We don't know who's making these pick ban decisions. We don't
We
know if
don't.
it's Reeford and the other coaching staff telling Sven this is what you must play every game, obviously. But it, regardless of who's making that decision, I think the team has to look at it and kind of question the validity of their decision. And I have to think it was just a misread on the meta or something going wrong within the team. Because we'll come on to talk about the second Cloud9 series in a minute, but we saw a very different Cloud9 in the
Yeah,
lower bracket.
yeah, we did. And like just to touch up on this game, I think yeah, like we said, Sven not having the confidence is really worrying. Like you said, whoever's making the decisions, it needs to be looked at here because a team like FlyQuest, Cloud9 on paper should have been able to win this like 3-1 or 3-0 easily.
Yeah, 100%. And the last point that I want to bring up before we move on to another series, we talked a lot about Santorin and how incredible he is, but the man I want your opinion on is Solo, the top
Ooh,
laner for FlyQuest. I think is a shoe in for one of the best remaining top laners at the moment because don't get me wrong, he's not flashy, he's not playing carry picks, but especially in this series, Cloud9 just let him have Shen all four games.
yeah. And the fact that you
And
said he's not playing carry picks, I would argue that Shen is an extreme carry pick.
well, I mean, what he was able to do in the lane, especially against Licorice on Licorice's signature pick of the gangplank, he just looks so dominant in the even in the early laning phases as a Shen, and he just had great ultimate timings. He looks great, and he had this positive scoreline every single game.
Yeah, and he allowing him to pick up the Shen is super weird. And again, you have to look at Cloud9's decision making here. Why are they not banning that away? Why are they focusing so hard on panic banning the Lilia after game one? Why are they panic banning that Graves? It's super weird stuff. Again, panic banning the Caitlyn. I think all of these bans were super odd and pretty much
Yeah,
just panic bans.
and I would have much rather seen a ban towards something like a Shen because you don't want Licorice to play the Shen. You really don't.
No.
You want Licorice to be on a Vladimir, on a Gangplank, but if he can't play his picks into this Shen, I think you need to ban it at some point.
Yeah, if you ban away that Shen, allow Licorice to play the Vlads like you said, and allow
Yeah,
him to carry. Like a Vladimir late game, no matter what state the game is in, if his team's working well around him, he can carry that game. But when you have something like a Shen on the other team, it's super hard for him to get an advantage in lane and in late game as well.
yeah, definitely. Any other points on FlyQuest? Because that's the only series they played this week, and FlyQuest qualified for Worlds
Yeah, off the
this
back of that
Dominica
game, and
week for Cloud9.
I've got to say, FlyQuest for me, I'm kind of rooting for them here. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah,
they look like
they might
a really really good team, and
they might be the strongest team in North America at the moment, and I think their winners' final match, which we'll come to touch on in a minute, is going to be so interesting.
it will be a great game, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I'm definitely rooting for FlyQuest there.
Yeah, and they it's a lovable team to see them turn around. Um, Not only the players and their placement, but also the branding side of it.
Yeah,
Tree Quest and Sea Quest, they're just doing so many things which make you buy into this team so much. So I can't help but root for them a lot of the time.
me too. And I'm not gonna lie, the other night I was looking on their shop and very much considering buying one of their new jerseys because they look
The new
so
jerseys are
nice.
so nice, actually.
The Sequest jersey is
I have
really
to
really
agree,
nice.
absolutely awesome, and they are doing a great job. So kudos to not only the players and the coaching staff for securing a place at Worlds for the first time for this organization and guaranteeing themselves top three in North America, um, if not being a shoe in for first or second place. But kudos for building a brand
Mm.
that is really strong and a lot stronger than some of the endemic organizations that we've had in the LCS for quite a long time. This is an organization who I only see going up from here.
Me too, and I know lots of the players were super happy. I think Santorin did a Q&A on his YouTube channel, someone from the team, and he was over the moon about this win. So
Yeah,
you can't not be happy for this team, and you can't not like them.
100%. It's great. It is great to see. It really, really is. So kudos to FlyQuest, and we can't wait to see them in the winners' final on the 30th in 6 days' time now.
Indeed.
The other upper bracket semi-final that we're going to talk about is the Team Liquid Golden Guardians game. And spoiler, this was very one-sided. This is might be the most one-sided game we've seen in the LCS playoffs so far, and that feels really bad for Golden Guardians. But Team Liquid was simply the stronger team this whole game. And me and you have a little bit of a disagreement actually as to what caused Team Liquid to be so dominant. Because I attribute it to a lot to Broxer. Actually, I thought that he looked really good on the Lee Sin, finally looking to start to be part of this team rather than just being on the edge. He looks like he's integrated better into the team now, at least from my perspective. But I know you would disagree with me.
Yeah, I mean, I've always held Brox up to a high standard ever since he was playing for Fnatic earlier in the season, and I think he is a good jungler, but there's just some very basic things that he's lacking, and this is no like shade towards Broxer because I think he's an amazing player, but there was just certain things where I was kind of just looking at my screen and thinking, okay, why has he done that? What's his decision making here? There were lots of times where he would either go for a gank mid lane and miss his Q on Lee Sin. Like he played Lee Sin, I think he played it for all three games.
All three games, yeah.
Um, And yeah, he looked a lot more aggressive, but there were times when he would go for the gank and then walk to bot side river and just sort of strafe back and forward for like 30 seconds and just pretty much just waste time. And to me, it was like, okay, you can be getting a lot done. Like topside scuttles up in that time, you could have rotated, blah blah blah. But I think especially in the late game, Broxer played really really well on this Lee Sin. But for
Mm.
for early game, I think there was a lot more impact he could have had, but that's no in no means to take away from the impact that he had on the series at all.
Yeah, I think I agree. Maybe he could have done better in the early game, but if you compare the current Broxer we're seeing to, a few weeks ago where Broxer was on Graves and they finished the game with a win, and he was like 0-0-0 at 20 minutes or something. Like
Yeah,
at least he's having some impact now. He's definitely improving, and I'm not saying he's suddenly this monster who is, carrying the team in the early game, but he is at least working with his solo laners at the moment to have some sort of impact in the early game.
yeah,
And if he can keep that trajectory, I think he might fare better against Santorin, who will be playing in the winners bracket final.
yeah. And I can imagine this series especially has given Broxer himself a lot of confidence because I know
Mm,
from watching a lot of the old Fnatic vlogs around their time of the playoffs, etc. Broxer looked like someone who was a very nervous player, especially on stage. But being in the comfort of being around his teammates with no crowd, I can imagine he's got a lot more confidence, and this series especially is probably going to give him a lot of confidence. So
yeah,
super positive stuff from him. Like you said, doing a lot better than earlier in this season, and I guess now he's finally finding his place within the team, which
yeah,
which is which is
definitely. And
super which is super super good.
yeah, and hopefully we see him get better and better because he's going to have a very, very tough time playing against Centurion
Definitely.
in their next best of five because uh, although he still struggles to affect the early game, we know that Centurion doesn't have any of those issues at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Um, Another standout player on the side of Team Liquid was Jensen. Again, simple champions for simple carry games is the only thing I'll say for him.
Yeah.
He looks just like the consistent carry player for this team, and I think that's really, really benefiting them at the moment.
Yeah, and his Azir getting that twice is super good. And again, you have to question why they didn't ban it. But but
Yeah,
although Azir is a bit of a odd champion to ban, I think, because there's so many mid laners. I think mid lane especially is the role which is hardest to ban for, especially in the current meta because there's so many mages, there's so many AD mid laners that can be picked up, and yeah, his Azir looked really aggressive, really powerful, and those big ults from him were especially what's the word? I don't know the word. Um,
especially
yeah,
impactful.
impact.
They're really he's really able to control team fights really well, which is something that we want out of the mid laner from a slightly slower team like Team Liquid.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah, especially impactful. Able to get those picks, etc., in the late game to
Mm,
pretty much make an extremely dominant series for Liquid.
yeah, and you know, even when after two games of Jensen on the Azir, uh, Golden Guardians finally think enough is enough. We'll ban it. We'll take away both the Akali and the Azir. Jensen just plays LeBlanc and looks amazing on it. Has a Majahiz and is absolutely stacking that through the room.
Yeah, exactly, and
And it's just another dominant game. It doesn't look like at the moment that you can ban this guy out and kind of put him off his current pace.
yeah, and I loved the aggressive style that he played on LeBlanc, which is extremely different to lots of LeBlancs we see in the LCS. The only other person I'd say who plays super aggressive on the LeBlanc is Bjergsen, and it looked very Bjergsen-esque in this game, I must say. Going for that aggressive, getting the Medjais early, being able to stack that. I'm pretty sure he had 25 to end the game. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, looking extremely strong on that LeBlanc. And again, another pocket pick for him. So it's super good to see, and I wonder if he'll pick that up more. It'll be exciting to
I
see if he does.
only have to imagine so.
Yeah. definitely.
Now, heading to the lower bracket matches, we had Golden Guardians and Cloud9 falling down in the first one of these matches. After 48 hours off, Cloud9 returned to play Evil Geniuses. And this wasn't a convincing 3-0, but it definitely was a 3-0 for Cloud9 over EG. So they kept their dreams of going to Worlds alive.
Yeah. And Sven looked better in this series, I thought.
So much better.
Seeing him not on the Ezreal really made me smile. When he picked Senna,
Yeah.
I was like, finally he's not
Finally,
first
something that
looking in
isn't
Ezreal.
Ezreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not to say Ezreal is a bad champion because actually I don't know. I think Ezreal right now isn't the best, especially for pro
I
play.
think I think he's a tier below. I think you have like, you know, you have a few top tier pickle ban AD carries at the moment, right? You have the Caitlyn, you have the Ashe, and you have the Senna.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have um, I think Ezreal is a tier below, and I think Callista is like to the side.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
can't always pick her, but if you pick her in the right team comp, she is a top tier AD carry in my opinion.
yeah, and you always have other picks for ADC. Um,
Hmm.
like like you said, you've got your top tiers like your Caitlyn, your Senna, your Ashe, but there's always other picks like Kalista, um, these other champions who
Yeah,
are kind of more carry orientated.
yeah, and we saw Sven come from a bad four Ezreal games, pick up the Senna, slightly more supportive in the first game, but then they early lock in the Callista twice for him. This is a classic Sven pick, and he looks dominant off of it. Pairing it with Vulcan's Blitzcrank and Rakan, giving Vulcan the opportunity to finally engage again and control the pace of the game instead of being on the Yumi, just looks so much better for this whole team.
Yeah, and you have to wonder after their first series of the week, or I can imagine they were like, listen guys, okay, we're gonna need to absolutely fucking dominate this series, otherwise everyone's gonna think we're a shit team. And they came out and did it, so props to them. Honestly,
Yeah,
they looked like
definitely.
a
And
much stronger Cloud9 in this best of five.
the only caveat I have to give is that they did have Niski on TF for all three games. And Niski, we know, can be absolutely amazing on this TF. He really is one of the best players in North America at using it to impact the side lanes and get his team ahead, which we saw him do in every single game for this team. And I can't imagine that in any of the remaining playoff games that he's going to be allowed to play that.
Yeah, one thing which I think he did so well on Twist of Fate here, and I think this is a really good tip actually that I've heard him talk about before, and I've heard lots of the high level Twist of Fate players talk about before, is when you're level 6 on that TF in mid lane, make sure you have one, an XP advantage so your laner doesn't have level 6. Two,
Mm,
make sure you have mana to use that ult so you can get a gank off effectively and use your full combo,
yeah,
which he did extremely well. Level 6 in all three of
yeah.
these games, he was getting
Every
map
time
pressure.
immediate.
Exactly, and he had that gold card ready. Ults, bang, that's a kill easily. Easily in every single situation. Twisted Fate when he hits 6, get that side lane pressure.
Yeah. And he looked great and he did that every time. And I have to we've criticised a lot of drafts today, but you have to say, was it worth banning it in the second or the third game?
Uh,
I'd say probably. If you can't answer it with something like the Galio,
yeah.
or maybe even a Silas to steal the ult and have side lane pressure, be able to follow the side lane pressure, what how do you expect to answer the pick?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think maybe looking towards banning that was probably the best shout. But then again, if this team, as we saw, were going for more carry oriented champs, we know Niski likes a Zoe as well. We know he likes those other carry champs. So I guess they were probably thinking if we ban this, he's just going to play something that's even a bigger of a lane bully and an early game bully that can snowball harder.
maybe I don't know, but like I don't know. I don't know if Niski's Zoe has been absolutely amazing so far. Like he got it twice against FlyQuest and didn't look great, whereas on the TF he always looks great. So it's just a question of, are you more happy to kind of pressure him in the lane and stop his Zoe from building up, or are you willing to answer his TF in the side lanes? And they couldn't do that in the series, which is really disappointing for me.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. I feel like definitely a ban towards TF would have been the best shout here because they just literally couldn't shut it down.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's the point where we say goodbye to evil geniuses.
Yep.
Making it to the second round of the playoffs is impressive for this team, who was definitely struggling towards the end of the season. So, congratulations to them, and it'll be very interesting to see what they can do next year
Yeah.
when Huni becomes a resident, and they'll be able to play with Huni, Jizuke, and Bang. Will definitely be very interesting to see the EG squad next
Yeah,
year.
and I mean, I feel like you still have to give them props. They've done pretty well in the playoffs here, going toe to toe with FlyQuest in their first best of five. It was pretty close. I think it was 3-2, and then beating 100
Yeah,
Thieves 3-0. So
yeah.
you can't say they're a bad team. I think
No,
they definitely proved themselves to be a pretty good team here in the LCS.
especially for one of the new orgs after franchising, it's definitely great to see them with a good performance. But I think it will hurt a little bit going from fifth in the spring split to third in the spring split to fifth in the summer split.
Yeah, without a doubt.
The final and possibly the most interesting um, game that we had
Yep.
was the rematch of Golden Guardians TSM. Now, in the first game, Golden Guardians looked absolutely brilliant against TSM, able to 3-0 them handedly, shutting down Bjergsen and making Double Lift look like a noob.
Yes.
This series, however, was a very different tale. Talk to me about how this one went.
This series for me was very interesting. I think games one and two looked pretty close, but Golden Guardians managed to edge it out in the end. I would even argue that TSM had the lead in game two, but managed to throw it in the end, which was super sad stuff. And at that point, I was kind of like, oh no, it's going to be another 3-0 for Golden Guardians here. But TSM managed to reverse sweep it and come up with a 3-2 win, which was an amazing feeling for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, games one and two, Golden Guardians winning, but not in a super convincing manner. Whereas TSM looked really strong in games three and four, and Double Lift picking Ash in all games here was an interesting choice, I thought. But he played better this week, a lot better, and I think one thing he did was not being cocky left anymore. Not being super cocky with his picks, picking the Ash because it's kind of more supportive ADC at the moment in the meta,
Yeah.
um, and able to get those big ults off, shut down those things for his team, and not going for these super aggressive plays, not trying to be flashy double lift like we've seen in the past, playing better around his team, and I thought that was really good. And then in the last
Yeah.
game, Bjergsen on Zillion looked incredible,
Oh,
and
so good on it.
he absolutely smurfed that game and was able to pretty much 1v9 it. In my
Yeah.
opinion,
Def
he played out of his mind on that Zillion.
Definitely. The Zillion, the only time they didn't ban it of the whole best of five series,
Yeah,
Bjergsen locking it in with confidence, and you know what he's going to do on it. And as soon as you gave it to him, you can imagine how confident he starts to feel in the final game of the series after winning two in a row to start the reverse sweep. He locks in that Zillion. He goes, "This is my game, boys. Don't worry. I got this.
yeah.
I got this one."
And I heard Williff speaking after the game saying when they saw that Zillion was open, they knew they'd won the series.
Yeah, it really is. He's so incredible on this, and like he's never missing an ultimate timing. He's always getting people back up. He's able to zone control so well with the bombs,
Yeah.
making sure he layers them in just the right way so that he always has one or two left over, but has some on the floor to control where the enemies can move around those objectives. Just looks so good.
Yeah, and Broken Blade looks a lot better in this series as well. I think
Yeah.
uh, managing to shut down Hauntzer in the early game, in the games that they
Mhm.
won, looking so much better, and Hauntzer arguably looking like a really not very strong top laner in this series. I thought it allowed TSM to punish them a lot harder than I guess that Golden Guardians would have liked, but props to Broken Blade regardless, because he looked like a really
Yeah.
strong top laner here.
Yeah, I think even in the first two games which Guardians won, Hunter was still struggling a little bit on the Shen and the Mordekaiser, and then they continued to pick the Mordekaiser for two more games after he struggled, has a pretty poor performance in the second game, which they were still able to win,
Yeah,
mainly to FBI on the Caitlyn.
yeah,
Um, and then and then we see this switch from Broken Blade, where I imagine he realizes, huh, Haunter is not doing very well
yeah,
this series. And he goes, trust me, pick the Jacks for me into the Mordekaiser. This is a pick that we see so often from the LPL
mm,
as a counter to the Mordekaiser, which is really popular over there. And the Jax was dominating the Mordekaiser in the lane and was really able to both split push and team fight quite well, which is surprising from more of a side lane pick.
yeah. And like you said, the Hanson not looking super convincing on his Mordekaiser. That Jax counter pick was a really nice pick for TSM, I thought, and able to shut it down because we know late game Mordekaiser, if he becomes a threat, he's pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah, definitely. And it was, it's great to see Broken Blade having some more carry performances, and then of games 4 and 5, being able to pick the Renekton Nidalee combination
Oh
for
my
Broken
god,
Blade Speaker.
that
They
combo.
clearly have been practicing this one because it looked so much better than what we've seen in the past. We saw it um, a little bit against Dignitas, but this looks like they knew exactly what they were doing to absolutely take over the top side of the map, snowball this early game Renekton, and then allow the more early game champion that we see in Renekton to just dominate the whole game from start to finish.
Yeah, and that combo of Renekton is unbelievably strong. And Speaker, granted, played super well in the Nidalee in Game 4. And this is something we could tell he's been playing in scrims, he's been playing in solo queue, and
Yeah.
he proved that it can work in pro play in these playoffs. So
Yeah.
I think Nidalee is a top jungler at the moment.
And I absolutely love the confidence that we're now starting to see from Speaker the further we get into these playoffs. Even just in his Nidalee play, right? He's not going jungle item and then Athene's or second or third item Athene's.
No.
No, he goes jungle item, Zonya's, uh, and then into the haunting guys. Like, looks so good every time on this Nidalee. Going for a higher damage build, really kind of pushing, and he only managed to get the haunting guys in the fourth game because they ended it in 24 minutes. He couldn't even get to the Leandries to kind of really start to come online. It just looks so much more confident compared to the player that we saw at the start of the summer split having some really rough games.
Yeah, and I think the early Zhonya's for a Nidalee is super strong because especially in early game your cooldowns is still quite long on your spear, etc. And if you can hit that spear, jump into the fight, do your damage, burst someone, pretty much one shot someone from the damage from Zhonya's, then pop that Zhonya's whilst the rest of the team jumps on you, and then you have your team to back you up, and you come out that Zhonya's, your cooldowns are off, you can heal, etc. and just be a huge threat in team fights, not just a ganking potential. I think Nidalee here, it got proved that she is a huge threat in team fights as well.
Yeah, and that's brilliant to see because this is another champion that you start to worry about from Speaker, who was someone that we were worried about coming into best of five. series, does he have enough champions? But no, he seems to be coming through really, really well, and that's a great thing for TSM looking towards the future.
Yeah, I agree.
The the last point that I wanted to ask you about for this series is we saw Treats come in halfway through the summer split, play their first two playoff games, including their 3-0 loss to Golden Guardians. TSM announced earlier this week they were planning to split time in scrims between Biofrost and Treats, and they decided to play Biofrost this series. So just give me your closing thoughts on Biofrost's performance back in the main lineup for TSM.
Yeah, so I thought he played okay. I wouldn't say he was by any means a star player for this team. And I know they're gonna be running with him in their upcoming games as well, because I heard Dolliff talking about how they're gonna be practicing all week, and they've only been practicing with Biofrost for about a week again since
Mm.
um since they got bench treats effectively. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, I think he played well. There was some weird moments I thought from him, which is probably just down to communication. Like in game five, where it was a pretty close game up until the last kind of 5-10 minutes of the game, where Nidley went for the Dragon Steel at the same time as Bard ulted the Dragon. I thought,
and that is straight trolling.
yeah,
Yeah,
it is, and I thought it was probably just some communication issues, something like that, where they haven't had enough time to practice with each other. But hopefully those kind of things will be ironed out for next time they play. And yeah, I do have a lot of confidence in him, so
yeah,
it will be good to see what he can do with this team. And I think him and Double Lift actually make a really good combo.
yeah. It's nice to see. He's picking slightly more lane dominant supports, which is something that we know Double Lift really likes. And he's also matching up better against someone like Huhi, who's been performing really, really well on these Enchanter supports, which is, I think, where Treats struggled a lot. Better at engaged supports, but definitely struggling on these Enchanters, which we've seen that Biofrost now is definitely more comfortable on.
Yeah, I agree, and it's definitely a series that can at least give TSM fans some kind of hope for their Worlds performance. I mean, I wouldn't say it's super convincing, but we definitely saw them come alive in the last few games here. So it's some pretty confidence filling stuff, I suppose.
Yep. And so next week we only have two best of fives compared to the four that we've been used to. Those being the winners' final against for Team Liquid FlyQuest. Both of those teams have secured their spot in Worlds now. Very quickly, Ollie, give me your prediction for that series.
This game it's gonna be. I'd say it's probably gonna go to all five, and for me, I would have to say just because of their performance this week, I'm gonna give it to FlyQuest going 3-2.
That's very interesting. I definitely agree on the FlyQuest, actually. I think that, at least in the current form, they are better, but I think I'm going to give it 3-1 to them. I think that
Really?
Um, it's going to be a surprisingly dominant game. I think that there are some clear mismatches for both teams. I think the Wild Turtle is looking really, really, really strong, and I think that he'll be able to um, kind of bully around tactical, especially in the laning phase.
Mm.
And then I think that the jungle mismatch is the place that I'm most worried about with how good Centaurin has been looking. And I think in almost all of these games, Centaurin is going to secure a lot of the early drakes for FlyQuest, and it will be a case of them just being able to close out the games, looking to get Soul every time.
Yeah, and I'd say that that's a pretty good prediction with the jungle mismatch. It's gonna be hard for Broxer to get come alive into these games, but we'll see what he can do.
Definitely. The other best of five that we're going to see is the losers round three. The winner of this game will go to Worlds. So we've
Mm.
locked in two of our three Worlds contenders from North America. Either TSM or Cloud9 will go to Worlds, and not both of them for the first time in quite a long
No.
time now. Who are you picking to both win this game and lock in a final uh, World spot from the LCS?
I again think this is gonna, just because of these two teams' histories and because they know each other so well, I am gonna say this is gonna go to 5 games again. But I think Cloud9 will take it 3-2, and
Ooh,
just because TSM, I'm still not super convinced about this lineup. I'm still not super convinced about Biofrost. I'm still not super convinced about Doublelift. And I think Cloud9, if they can get their carry picks, will be able to win this series. But I think it will be very, very close.
I will take the opposite side of that, not just because I'm being difficult, because I do think the TSM have a better chance of winning this. We've seen TSM struggle, don't get me wrong, but we've also seen them succeed on a wider variety of team comps. And so I feel like they'll be able to win in the pick and ban phase more often than Cloud9, who have a very telegraphed way that they want to um, draft and play the game. And I think that TSM are slowly getting better, getting Biocross reintegrated to the team. And when you compare that trajectory to Cloud9, it seems like they seem to struggle every time they are on a downwards trajectory. And it will be a real shame if Cloud9 don't make it to Worlds with how dominant they've been in North America this year. But I don't think that now you can say they are a dominant team anymore. That is so far in the past. I don't think it weighs into this game, and that's why I predict TSM.
Yeah, what do you think? It'll go to all 5 games, or?
Yes, not because I think that Cloud9 will necessarily be really strong. I just feel like TSM is still struggling with a lot of things, and they will throw at least one or two, like one game, and then I think Cloud9 can win one game.
Mm,
Um,
interesting.
and I think all of TSM wins will be close. I just think that they are slightly more consistent than this Cloud9 team, barring a 1 in 5 throw, essentially.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. And we'll come back and see who predicted it right next week. If either of us, I mean, we both said it will go to 5 games, but we chose the opposite
Yeah.
teams that we're supporting. But I mean, I would rather see TSM win this best of 5, but I think Cloud9 will probably take it.
Well, we shall see. And that is all for the LCS. Join us next week for reviewing our predictions, but we have to move on to our second region that we're talking about on this week's episode, which is the LEC, who started their week of playoffs with 3 games. We had the 2 upper bracket semi-finals after our losers bracket round 1, and that's the one we're going to talk about first. We're going to work through these in chronological order. Our first one, losers bracket round 1, SK Gaming versus Schalke. What a best of 5.
What a best of 5 indeed. What
A best of 5 that we only got to see 3 games because Schalke smashed it so hard.
because they are one of the, if not the best team in EU.
They are so strong at the moment. They
Mm.
really, really are. They looked absolutely fantastic, really changing up kind of the way that they were playing throughout this series. They looked so strong.
Yeah, I agree, and they just seem to keep getting better and better.
Yeah,
And Abadagi again playing out of his mind on the carry picks. 2 Orianna picks here was super good. He was able to zone his lane really really well, play super effectively in the early game, as well as getting those late game shockwaves to just annihilate SK here, not having a chance at all, and just
yeah.
absolutely outclassing them in the mid lane.
I mean, you say late game shockwaves, but one of those games when he was on Oriana only went to
Oh
25
yeah,
minutes because their top lane Renekton was snowballing it so hard alongside Gilius's Hecarim. It just looked fantastic throughout the early and mid game for this team.
yeah, I agree, and Gilius again looking super good, like you said, on the head twice, which is a really strong pick for him at the moment.
Mm,
And I wouldn't say that I mean his pocket picks are, you've seen him play as Sejuani a lot, which he's really strong on the Hecarim's, but he also brought out the Kha'Zix here, and I thought he
yeah,
looked really strong on a more carry
he,
pick.
he looked brilliant on the Kazakhs, and the only reason that he had to play the Kazakhs is because SK banned away his Hecarim after he played it
Yeah.
twice. They were like, "No, we can't deal with this anymore," and he says, "Don't worry, I'll just play Kazakhs," which you've seen him on before have great performances, and we saw him have a great performance again here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think SK were probably right in banning away the Hecarim because
Mm,
it's a really strong pick for them. But yeah, it just looks like they weren't prepared for him to pull out something like the Kha'Zix.
yeah, and it was really disappointing, I think, from the SK side. Um, Obviously, it's you can make the argument that SK are a slightly one-dimensional team, relying on Crown Shot
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of the time to do the heavy lifting for this team. And although they gave him some picks where he definitely could have taken over the game, it just seemed like the rest of the team wasn't there to support him a lot of the time.
Yeah, and especially in game one where SK picked the four range champs with Crown Shot playing Jinx with the
Mm.
one melee Volibear, and we saw that with the first team fight here. I think this game was over really quickly if I'm remembering.
Mm.
But yeah,
25 minutes.
yeah, this was the game where the Orianna just smurfed on them, where we saw Abadagi playing extremely aggressive on the Orianna, and yeah, SK again were really dependent on Volibear being able to get into those fights, and he did. To be fair, there was a big team fight around Scuttle in topside quite early on, which
Mm.
basically snowballed the game for Schalke, where the Crown Shot to me just looked like he couldn't get into the fight, and
Yeah.
like they're relying on Crown Shot so much, but if he can't get into the fight, if he has no engage, then he can't really do anything, and that's where I think Crown Shot's getting really let down by his team here.
Yeah. And that was, that's shown in his scoreline. He went 0-1-0.
Yeah,
He had almost no impact in this game at all, barring 230 farm in 25 minutes, which still is not mind blowing. It's not like you were funneling all of your farm into this guy, giving him a strong front line for the Jinx to play around, which probably could work, especially in a team like this where you argue that the AD carry is so much better than the other players. It feels bad that he might have been let down by some of his teammates.
yeah, and especially for game one, SK tried to do a really weird. I don't know if you watched the early game, but SK tried to do an extremely weird duo jungle swap kind of thing, like a season 5
Yeah,
meta. But they don't realize Odoamne is the god of swaps, and he's been playing since season 2 and was able to read that swap from a mile away.
yeah,
And
yeah. He looked. It's something that he was possibly prepared for and just knew how to react, and that gave Schalke such a massive advantage.
yeah, without a doubt. And SK not being able to get Crown Shot fed in any of these games just is leads them down a road for loss here. And we
Yeah.
saw after their first game, Schalke pretty much picked the exact same draft for the second game, except for swapping top laner out for Renekton, which again worked really well.
Yeah, and they kept some really key parts of their draft very stable, which I actually really like from this team. They're picking the Senna Nautilus bot lane every single game in this series, and it's clear that it works really well. And we know that Neon is not a superstar
No.
for this team. He's not a bad player by any means, but he's not a world beater. He's not a superstar. But putting him on more supportive picks like the Ash we've seen before and now the Senna, he looks super strong in a more supportive role, enabling the carry players on the top side of the map that we know can keep playing really well and allowing them to be aggressive with some backup. And then you also have Dreams looking much better now, giving him more engage options on someone like a Nautilus. Means that he's able to control when the team goes in, when the team doesn't, much better. And it means that he definitely is allowed to shot call a little bit more in the mid and late game for this team.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Schalke just looked really prepared for this best of five. SK super reliant on in their draft, super reliant on crown shot, but it just seemed like Schalke was super ready for this. And in game one, like I said, the Trick picked Lilia jungle and tried to gank early on
Mm,
Lilia, which is just a bad idea. And I guess like Schalke were just ready for this. SK just picking that Lilia was a bad pick for me, I think, because it's clear to see the Trick hasn't played it much, doesn't
yeah,
really know. He's like, oh yeah, people in the LCK are winning with Lilia. It's got 100% win rate in the LCK. Let me pick it here, and I'll be able to dominate.
yeah,
But no, it's right now got a really bad win rate for anywhere else other than the LCK.
yeah, and it definitely can be a strong pick. Like we've seen other people like Centaurian use it really well in the LCS.
Mm,
I just think you need a lot of experience on it because it does have a very different play style to any of the other meta junglers at the moment.
without a doubt, yeah.
And no, and with that loss, we do say goodbye to SK
Yep.
from the playoffs as
Which is
Schalke
sad.
move. Yeah, as Schalke move forward to the second losers match, and with a single more win, Schalke will make it to Worlds, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Uh, and so we will talk about their matchup once we have covered the rest of this week's games. The first of which, Saturday night's game, was G2 against Mad, and I didn't catch a lot of this game. So I'll ask you, Ollie, what happened in this game and how did we get a 3-1 win for G2?
Well, simply Caps is a monster. Simply put, Caps is an absolute monster. In game one, G2 just destroyed them. Were able to run it down in pretty much 25 minutes. I think the game was a super short game. Caps on his pocket picks again, able to just destroy them. And in game one, just looking like a super convincing team here. LeBlanc, he played as LeBlanc in game one, where he had 25 Magi stacks by about 20 minutes, and again getting 25 Magi stacks in all of the games, except for the game where he played Irelia, in which his Irelia looked really clean as well. Um, like I said, Caps being a monster here and just absolutely destroying them, and Mad recognised this, tried to ban him out in drafts in every single game. Couldn't really do that because Caps has such a wide variety of champions, and like I said, mid lane is one of the hardest lanes to ban for. I think there's so many champions available, and they were super focused on shutting Caps down in early game, but Caps just outplayed them and was able to not die early. Able to get his lead mid lane, was able to have support from his jungler to get that lead, and having map pressure, etc., to just completely outclass Mad here. And this is not to discredit the rest of the team. I think the rest of the team played really well, but Caps is definitely the star in this series.
Okay. And so I have a few questions for you. Was this G2 performing incredibly well, or was this an underperformance from Mad? Are we worried about Mad going forward?
I am a little bit worried about Mad because they seemed extremely scared in this best of five. They looked like they were definitely on the back foot even from to begin with, because even in game one, without even playing any games against G2, they were banning away Caps' pocket picks. They looked scared. Already in drafts, they looked like they were a team who were afraid of this G2 lineup, and this is got to be something said about Mad because they just simply weren't prepared for this. They weren't prepared for his other picks like his LeBlanc, his Irelia, and yeah, it's definitely credit to G2 because they played really well. But Mad certainly looked scared and like they weren't prepared for this best of five at all.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. And I want to also ask you about the Nico top, which we saw twice
Yeah,
from Wonder on G2, winning both of the games. So,
yep.
how strong do you think this pick is? We've seen some buffs come through it recently. Is this something we'll see more of, or is this just a G2 thing?
I think Wonder especially. has it down to a T with a Nico top. He played it so well. Was able to win those 1v1s. Like getting solo kills in top lane was super impressive from him. And being able to have that late game team fight pressure, hitting all of his skill shots, etc. And yeah, we've seen Nico buffed a little bit recently. So I think other teams will definitely be looking at this and saying, okay, hold on, Nico's a really strong champion at the moment, I think. And I think she's more orientated for mid lane, but we saw like them picking up top and having two carries on team was worked really well, and I think it might just be a G2 thing, but we'll see what other teams can do to adapt to the new meta. I wouldn't say it's a new meta because Nico got buffed in, I think it was 10.16. We're now on 10.17, but the
Yeah.
pro play is still not live on 10.17 yet. But yeah,
Um,
I think
and
it's
so
a super strong
obviously,
pick.
Mad aren't out of the LEC yet. They do have one more life in the losers bracket, and we'll talk about their upcoming game shortly. The other best of five that happened was the Fnatic Rogue series, and you messaged me after this game and you said you were very pleased with
Oh
Fnatic's
my
performance,
god.
and that is just simply shown in the scoreline. Fnatic
Whew.
3-0 in the here. Fnatic, the playoff buff is real. I don't know what these guys ate for breakfast. It must have been Weetabix because they were on fire this
It
series.
was incredible from all of them. All of them,
Yeah,
especially I have to give it. I know the fans gave self-made MVP for this series, and he looked so good. I have to give it to
yeah,
him on his
looked
Evelyn
amazing.
in game one, just absolutely destroying Hansama and the other laners. Um,
It's sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I should say it's so clear that Fnatic will always perform. This Fnatic lineup will always perform well in best of fives because they come in, they have a week off, they're clearly prepared, they've done their homework, they've made some new picks, and we see Selfmade come out with two Evelyn's games and a Karthus game, and we're not seeing Evelyn almost anywhere else in the world at the moment in the major regions, and he looked phenomenal on it, and we've seen how strong Karthus can be in somewhere like the LCK, and he played that to perfection. And the team knew how to play around these kind of picks. It just looked brilliant. He was constantly taking over the game.
Yeah, and you say actually no one's been playing Evelyn recently, but I saw something recently. Although I don't watch a lot of the LPL, I know that's been actually quite a prominent pick in the LPL recently.
I
Actually,
actually didn't know that. I don't too many games to watch the
yeah,
LPL at the
yeah,
moment.
but I saw something recently saying that it's been a a very big pick for the LPL, very big pick or ban champion over there. So
Well, I think that Self-Made proved why it is just being able to sneak up and absolutely assassinate the carries on the side of Rogue. He didn't allow Larson to have an impact because anytime Larson stepped forward once Fnatic were winning the game,
yeah,
Self-Made was behind him every time on this Evelyn.
yeah,
And,
and
and you watch and he went
the
immediately dead.
there was a moment when I just made me absolutely smile where when Evelyn hit, I think it was the first time they hit level 6, and he was in bot lane, and in the fog of war, Huntama was under his tower. Evelyn gets the charm, presses Q once, obviously spams Q, E, and R, and he's dead immediately.
Yeah, it was it was that one, and then the Evelyn versus the Hansama in the final game
Yeah, in the mid lane.
in the mid lane where his Hansama's on Ezreal and he has a Hex Drinker, his E and flash up. He uses the E. He flashes away. Selfmade flashes after him, and Selfmade gets the kill almost immediately. And you as Hansama go,
It's just
"Come, what
unplayable.
more can I do?"
It's unplayable at that point. It's weird that they didn't ban it every consequential
Yeah,
game after game one. But then again, like I was saying, yeah, Selfmade got the MVP for this series. But for me personally, I would have to give it to Nemesis. He looked so much better than we've seen him in the rest of the split in this playoffs.
Mm.
He looked like like a number one or number two mid laner. Getting his Lucian for the first two games, he looked like
Yeah,
incredible in this Lucian. Was able to just shut them down. There was a play in bot lane where he was dove on 1v2 and just absolutely outplayed and dodged every single skill shot, got his ult off, and was able to pretty much put every single shot of the culling into I can't remember who it was, but and then backed up by the rest of his team, was able to shut them down and just proving himself as what I would say one of the best mechanical players in mid lane for their LEC. And yeah, I would say he is a super strong mid laner. You can't discredit him at all anymore. I know people, especially even Fnatic fans, love to give him shit, but he proved himself in this best of five, without a doubt.
100%. And he was able to bring out the cog more in the last game, which he once again looked great on. And the breadth and depth of the champions that he's looking strong on now is really, really encouraging.
Yeah,
As it is with the whole of Fnatic, and that's really, really great to see. Um, one of these perennially great European teams come through and perform well.
yeah, I agree. And Rogue here with the first seed team for the LEC, and it's super disappointing to see them not perform at all in this best of five. Um,
Definitely,
but yeah, no discredit to Fnatic though, because they for me played really well, and
they definitely did.
Hylissang and Reckless were able to show up as well, able to create great drafts for their bot lane with Hylissang picking his pretty much his pocket picks of Nautilus. He's one of the best one of the best engaging supports in the
Mm,
LEC in my opinion, and
de-
Bwipo as well playing really well in top lane.
yeah,
Just everyone
and
playing super well.
and of course we saw a few moments where it definitely looked like Whippo and Hylissang were inting, but I think that is part of the Fnatic charm
Yeah, it's
of
the
what
Bwipo and
they say.
Hilly special.
It's like they just run it down mid in the last game,
Yeah, it's
and you
their
go,
special.
hmm, that wasn't right. I guess they won't do that again, and they don't, and they go on to like destroy the game in 30
Yeah.
minutes or something. Like, I think this is just something that this team does, and I don't doubt now that they will always show up in these playoff best of fives.
Yeah, and it has to be super confidence filling for this Fnatic team where they didn't have the best split of their careers. Nemesis
Mm,
was probably one of the worst mid laners in the LEC on paper,
yeah,
with having super bad stats, etc. But coming back to improve themselves, it's got to be really confidence a big confidence boost for this team and for their coach, etc. And one play that I really liked was when Bwipo was on Sion in top lane and was able to 1v1. I can't remember who he was up against, but he got a solo kill like early on and was able to just
against GP.
yeah, he hit six before him, was able to just run it down at him and 1v1 him, and it was like just super impressive stuff from the whole team.
Yeah, definitely. And this isn't the last of Rogue that we'll see.
No.
Having got the first place spot in the summer regular season, they have both secured their place at Worlds already from the LEC. Um, and they have a second life in the losers bracket. The wins for both Fnatic and G2 do mean that they both will be going to Worlds. So we'll see both of those teams at Worlds also. So we have already 3 of the 4 uh, teams going to Worlds from the LEC. We only have 1 spot left.
No. We
And
we've got all four. It's Schalke. Don't worry. We've got all four. Don't worry.
well, there is a chance, however slim it might be, don't get me wrong, that Schalke may not make it to Worlds. The match that will decide that is the losers bracket, is the losers round 2.
Yes.
Falling down to that game is Mad Lions. They will have to play against Schalke, and one of these teams will go to Worlds and the other one won't. And it's going to be sad to say goodbye to either of these teams, if I'm honest. Mad Lions, definitely the darlings of the summer season with how well they performed and how great they were looking on unique picks.
Yeah.
But also Schalke, the miracle run, winning 3-0 in their first series. It would be absolutely phenomenal to watch this story come to a really compelling close and see them make it to the World Championships from being a 1-9 team.
Yeah, and I think especially that's going to be super interesting to see. Hopefully they can. I'm praying for them. One thing I think is
Yeah,
a bit sad though is the fact that Rogue will make it to Worlds over Schalke or
mad.
Mad
Yeah,
Lions here, because either of those teams arguably look so much better in best of fives than Rogue have looked pretty much in
yeah,
their entire history of best of fives, and especially in this best of five against Fnatic.
yes. It definitely. Um, I imagine it will change in the future. I think we'll definitely see some adjustment to the playoff format. I definitely like the playoff format, having double elimination,
Yeah,
but um, with the first place seed coming into the playoffs, guaranteeing their spot at Worlds, definitely feels not great, especially when you have a team like Rogue who seem to be struggling so much in best of fives. And if they go on to lose to the winner of Mad Schalke, that really, really is going to feel
that's going
bad.
to be super painful for Mad or Schalke.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who do you think, if you make a prediction, let's not think too much about the storylines,
yeah.
and let's look at the teams themselves. Who do you think will come out on top in that losers um, match against for Mad versus Schalke?
For me, I have to give it to Schalke because they look like a incredible team, one of the best in the EU at the moment. I would say definitely number one or number two, and for me right now, I would probably say G2 are probably the best team in the. Actually, I don't know. I'd probably say Schalke are the best, then G2, then Fnatic. But yeah, I'd have to definitely give
Oh,
this best of five to Schalke. I think they're gonna pretty much dominate it. I would say 3-0 or a 3-1 win for them.
wow, that is a strong prediction and some bold claims about where you're putting Schalke in the power rankings. I'm going to wait until the end of the season
I
before
think they're
I
such a good team.
claim that they are the best team in Europe because I think both Fnatic and G2 looked incredible again this week.
Yeah,
Um, but I do think that it's going to be a sad end to the season for Mad Lions. I think Schalke are going to take this. I do think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a 3-1 or a 3-2. I think the SK are a far weaker team than Mad Lions, and SK have very limited win conditions, whereas Mad have a number of ways that they can win the game. I just think that the consistency from Schalke, not having to rely on unique picks, unique drafts, just coming out every time with a good, consistent level, will be able to beat out Mad in a best of five.
yeah, and yeah, I agree. I think they'll be able to edge it without a doubt. And I mean, we'll have to wait. We have to wait and see for the upper bracket game to see who we can call the best team in EU and have our rankings. But yeah, what about this upper bracket game then? Fnatic versus G2. Who do you have in this best of five?
But this is Clash of the
Oh
Titans.
my
This is
God.
Battle of the Playoff Buffs. It really is. Both of these teams looking great, and it is very hard to pick. I think that um, if Fnatic can come into the season with more, into this series with more unique picks, Show and Evelyn, Karthus, maybe some other hidden jungle or top lane picks that they feel really confident on, then they can definitely win some games.
Mm,
I just think the firepower from G2 when you've got a player like Caps performing really, really, really well. You've got Wonder having the confidence to pick up some more unique champions, and then you have Perks as an AD carry who's quietly putting up massive damage numbers. I just think man for man, without something extra from Fnatic's draft and Fnatic's play, G2 will win this again.
Interesting. See, I'm gonna have to disagree there, and I mean, I know I'm a little biased because obviously I'm a big Fnatic fanboy, but I think that just from their performance recently and the playoff buffs for Fnatic, it's a real thing. It really is. In these best of fives, they show up every single time. They've always done it consistently, and I think, especially for a player like Reckless and Hylissang, that bot lane I think is actually stronger than G2's bot lane for me. The one real thing that we're going to have to keep an eye on is that mid lane, Nemesis versus Caps. Obviously, Caps is the better mid laner on paper, but it will be
Mm.
interesting to see this matchup. And yeah, I'm going to give it to Fnatic 3-2 here. I really think that they can pull it out of the bag.
Okay, and I'll go G2 3-1 against Fnatic.
Ooh,
We
interesting.
have one more best of five to talk about, and of course we can't make predictions because we don't know who will be playing in that one. But Rogue will play at least one more best of five against the winner of Mad Lions Schalke. Um, of course, we don't know who will make it to that game, but at least personally, I have to say I don't expect Rogue to beat either of the teams that they could play against. I don't think they will beat Mad or Schalke.
Yeah, neither do I. I think they have no real. I mean, especially in this best of five, they showed no passion. They showed no real compelling plays, etc. They showed no aggressiveness. They were always on the back foot from the beginning of this series. And yeah, I think playing against Schalke or Mad, two really aggressive teams, I think that they will not be able to win this best of five against either of those teams.
Yeah. And of course, we will see. They could take some of this time to really turn it around, but we will see that this weekend in the final game on Sunday.
Yeah, indeed, and it'll be a good one, whatever happens.
Definitely. And our last part of the show today is going to be talking about the LCK, but rather than completely talk about the matches that happened this week, we're going to do more of a deep dive into one of the teams that we really want to talk about, that being um, T1, as they've had some very interesting games this week. But before we start just talking about T1, we did see a Freak of Freaks secure their playoff spot over with a win over KT 2-1, and that's really good because this is a team who I think may not make it very far in playoffs, but will definitely benefit from more games against a team like T1, who they will be playing in the first round.
Yeah, and I agree. I think a Freak Freaks definitely deserve it more than KT in my opinion. So
Mm,
super good to see them securing their playoff spot. But yeah,
definitely.
T1 had some interesting games this week, in my opinion. Playing against Damwon Gaming in their first, I think it was their first game against Damwon,
It was their first, yeah.
where they actually lost 2-0. And for me, this was a super interesting game because for the first game, Closer played, and then I thought after this game they might swap it out and bring in Faker to see if he can secure the second games against the arguably number one team in the LCK Damwon Gaming because
Yeah.
I just believe Faker probably would have been a better pick here, but Closer, yeah, played both games and they ended up actually losing 2-0 against Damwon Gaming. So,
Mm.
what do you think about this?
Well, I don't know how much of this is actually down to the players. I think that um, we're seeing a tale of two T1s. That's a tongue twister. Um, a lot of the time, we see T1 be really, really strong when they have good, dominant drafts. But sometimes we just see drafts like these in this game that I think I just don't like. It just doesn't seem to work for me. Um, you had Silas for both games for closer, and I like it in the first game. I like a Silas into a TF. You're able to answer the side lane pressure,
Mm,
perform really well, and have a slightly bigger team fight impact. But going again to pick Silas into a Kassadin seems like a really, really poor matchup to opt into because you never want to steal a Kassadin ult. It's
No.
the most useless ult, one of the most useless ults. Still, like, yeah, you go forward once, you can go forward again and again and again, and it just feels like they came in with a bad plan, draft and play wise for this game, and that really, really made the players look much worse than they actually are.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the casting pick from Dan One was especially good here because I think they recognised that Closer wanted to play this Silas again, and
Mm,
were like, okay, we'll pick someone who just completely fucking counters it and can
yeah,
destroy him, especially in lane, and not
100%.
give him a opportunity to steal the casting ult. Like you said, that is a pretty much of a waste of an alt steal. Like there's some other champs as well, like LeBlanc, who is a pretty much a waste of a Silas ult. But yeah, it's with the late game pressure from a casting. If he can just stack his rower and just play his game, like late game casting will be able to destroy.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And it's like from the side of T1, like you give Damwon their favorite thing in the world, which is the TF, along with the Camille, which we know is such a powerful
Yeah,
combination. And you just give it up and you don't get a lot back, and you pick Maud, um, Silas, and you just think something about that doesn't feel great to me. It just feels like you have almost lost in draft. I don't know what they could do up against that team because um, the T1 team in the first game was not a really good 5v5 comp with great engage that can capitalize on the weak team fighting of the Dunwon side. They were just a worst side laning team than Damwon. And that showed because Damwon were able to run over that game in less than 30 minutes.
yeah, I agree, and they looked just like the better team all over here. And I mean, we already knew they were the better team, but they proved it here. And like just T1 just looked like, yeah, like you said, almost lost in draft because they just didn't really seem to have any kind of synergy, especially for game two. Their draft just looked super odd, and
Yeah, I hate the draft in game two.
yeah,
They picked Jace, Volibear, Silas, Senna, and Leona. And it just feels like you have two people who want to go in really hard in the Volibear and the Leona.
yeah,
You have two people that want to poke the whole time in Senna and Jace. And then you've got the Silas who just doesn't really do anything in this comp.
yeah, and
I just feel like half of the team had one idea, half the team had another idea, and he just said, "Yeah, just pick what you want." It just. I don't understand how you arrive at this being your good team comp.
yeah, I agree. I think although Silas, I think, is a super strong mid laner at the moment, actually, with the new Korean meta of maxing Q first, is I think actually really strong for Silas. But with a team comp like that, there's just nothing that he can get done.
Yeah, I do agree, and we saw Ghost really step up on the Ziggs, which is a pick that we haven't seen from him before.
Mm,
In the AD carry position. And he looked really good, being able to look after himself in all of these team fights, not get dove on, be far enough away from the main team fight while hurtling in this artillery damage. And I think it was a great pick as well in this team comp because you allowed your Renekton, your Set, and your Kassadin to dive in, play a very messy team fight
yeah,
while Ziggs was able to simply layer AoE damage on top to beat down the side of T1.
yeah, and I think Ziggs is especially a good pick into that comp. Going well with the Kassadin, like you said, having those messy team fights, and Ziggs being able to just stand at the back and hit his skill shots, get a big four or five man ults in, because in
Yeah,
those team fights everyone's going to be so close together with your Jaces, your Silases, the Kassadins.
yeah. I mean, they picked three and a half melee champions, the half being Jace, who's melee
Yeah,
half of the time. You know they're going to be clumped up, and Ghost showed that he could hit those massive ults over and over again, really punishing the close range team from T1.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a super good pick here, and I think Damwon just proved themselves to be the stronger team, even from drafts.
100%. Now, the other game that T1 played was against DRX, and this was even a more interesting game.
Yeah,
We had T1 winning game one, looking really strong. Closer, absolutely massive on his Akali once again. And then a questionable move was made.
yeah, I agree. I think it was super odd, especially after the performance of Closer in game one, for them to swap for Faker in game two. I was kind of just sitting there like, really? After that performance of Closer, like he
Yeah,
looked really good in that game.
it's especially after you leave Closer in for both games versus Dun One, which they
Yeah,
lost. I would expect this swap to come in the Dun One series if they were wanted to make it, if they thought that Faker was going to be good for this team. I imagine you bring it in after a loss where Closer didn't look amazing. I don't understand the thought process taking Closer out after having an amazing game, the whole team looking great, and putting in Faker. And at least unsurprisingly for me, the team just looked worse. It really did.
yeah,
Don't get me wrong, I think DRX had a significantly better comp than them in the second game. Um, but just the shot calling and the team fighting just looked off from T1. And it makes me ask, why do you put in Faker? And how much time has he had practicing with the team?
yeah. And I guess one kind of point of view of this decision making could have been after the Damwon T1 game where they lost their first game. They were like, okay, I guess one point of view could be that they value Closer higher than Faker, right? So if they know they're going to win a series, they're like, so for example, against the RXA, when they won game one and they had kind of that insurance game for themselves,
Mm.
they put Faker on to see how he could perform at the top level still, see if he is still performing at the top level. I guess that's one kind of point of view, but again, it's an odd choice, especially, but they
Yeah,
managed to win it, which is good.
they did. I just don't necessarily like the risk from T1, and I know it didn't affect their standing, so that kind of leans into more of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But DRX is a team that you're probably going to end up playing at some point. So for me, I would rather just close that out in a 2-0, build up some confidence, keep Closer in for both games, and have to show one less draft. That's my thing because they'll be playing them in 2 weeks' time if they manage to make it through the playoffs.
yeah, and one thing for me here again with this T1 side, I think this is going to be another confidence knock for Faker, playing that one game
Mm.
and losing it, like his first game in the LCK in,
And
in quite some time.
immediately being pulled back out.
Exactly, going to be another confidence knock for him, which he has already received a few of. If you've seen any of the interviews, he's not really very happy with being benched here.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine, but I totally get why the team has done it
Oh yeah, me too.
because the whole team looks better with Closer in. We've got Canna performing absolutely
Oh yeah,
amazingly, being put on more carry style picks. And when Faker's not in, he really is able to perform on them so well. He looks like one of, if not the best top laners in Korea at the moment with Closer in the lineup. And they just look like a better team every time he's in. He picked up both the MVPs for the games he played in this series. Like he just looks incredible.
yeah,
And I get fans wanting to see Faker, the legacy that that man has. But if you want T1 to be the best team that they can at the moment, I think you have to put Closer in every single match that you can.
yeah. I agree, and I think it will be really interesting to see like how they use Faker at Worlds, etc. And after Worlds, if he doesn't get a lot of game time, or if he does and T1 don't perform very well at Worlds, it will be interesting to see what he does personally, what his next steps are in his career. If he decides he wants to be a coach, a manager, or something like that, because I'm kind of with this swap for Closer, I think he himself and T1 are kind of alluding to maybe coming to the end of his career. I'm not 100% sure on that, but his career as a pro player in the starting lineup, at least.
I think he will always have a place within that organization.
Yeah, without
I
a doubt.
just have to agree with you and say it may not be as a starting player for much longer, which is a shame, but it's probably best for the team.
Yeah, and I think Closer is really happy with being able to play on the starting lineup, and I'm
Mm,
sure Faker is being very understanding as well. We know he's a very level-headed guy
yeah,
I mean, we've seen plenty of interviews with Faker where he seems to have his head screwed on very tightly.
yeah. And so, before we finish the episode, we'd just like to talk about the playoff games. Now, LCK has a slightly different format. So they have a wild card match with the fourth and fifth place teams, which is a best of three. Those two teams being Afrika Freaks fifth and T1 fourth. That game will be happening tomorrow as we speak, August the 26th. And then the rest of the playoff games are going to come thick and fast. We have Genji waiting in the quarterfinals, Dragon X waiting in the semifinals, and Damwon Gaming waiting in the finals. And there's only 48 hours between each one of these series. So there is about 1 week between the first game, the wildcard one, and the finals game
Mm.
um, that Damwon are waiting in, which is a very interesting way to see these teams really perform.
Yeah, and the first game we're seeing tomorrow, as you said, tomorrow, Afrika Freaks versus T1. Who do you have for this game?
There's no way that you can't predict T1. It's very simple. If they have closer in, they look amazing. I think they outclass Afrika Freaks in every single role. Um, Even Afrika Freak's strongest point, which I believe is Keen in the top lane. We've seen Kana absolutely step up when given some more carry picks, and I think this will be a very clean 2-0 confidence builder for T1.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're gonna clean sweep the series. Because if they play closer starting lineup, we know he's a great mid laner, and Kana, like you said, one of the best top laners in Korea at the moment. So that
And don't forget, in week 9, these two teams play the best of three, and T1
yeah,
2-0 that closer in the lineup. So I think, unfortunately for Afrika Freaks, they made it into playoffs, but they're going to have that journey cut to a premature end, I think, by T1.
yeah, and it's gonna be super interesting to see in the second game as well. I think we're both predicting that T1 will take that. What about for the second game then? If we're saying T1 will win, Genji versus T1, who do you have for that game?
Now, that's a significantly closer game, I think.
Yeah,
Um, these two teams haven't played against each other for quite a while now. I'm trying to find the last time they played, and I think it was week 5. So they haven't played each other for 5 weeks. And if I remember correctly, that was still when Faker was in the lineup. So this current T1, yeah, Faker was playing at that
yeah,
point, and it was a 2-0 for Genji. This T1 that we have currently is a significantly different team to the one that we've seen in the past, the last time these two teams matched up. But even though I think this T1 is better than the previous time they played, I still think that Genji looked like a team who's been stronger and more consistent throughout the whole summer season. And they have a more defined play style. And I think that will benefit them in a best of five where they've been shown to bring out some more unique picks.
yeah. I agree, and it will be interesting to see who takes this. Like you said, it's going to be a lot closer than the first game. So I don't think we can really predict who's going to win this. Well, I can't personally.
I would go three to Genji would be my best bet, but I'm not confident in that at all because I think both of these teams could be the third best team in Korea and go to Worlds.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a very, very, very close one, without a doubt.
100%. and we won't make any more speculative predictions after that because we'll have
Nah.
to see how that plays out. But we will have the wild card, the quarterfinals, and the semi-final games results to talk about on next week's episode, with a preview for the finals, with whoever Damwon Gaming will be facing.
Yeah.
Unless you've got anything else to add, I think that is the show for today.
Uh, don't think so, other than Fnatic are gonna win everything, and they're gonna win Worlds, and Reckless is gonna retire.
That's a very strong statement. And on that strong statement, that is the episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening so much. You can check us out on YouTube and on Spotify. Just
Yep.
search for Weighing in LoL. This has been the Weighing in League of Legends talk show, episode 4. Thank you all for listening so much.
Thank you. And make sure if you want to check us out on Spotify, the link will be in the description as well. And both mine and Josh's Twitter is also in the description. And
Yeah,
just below us, our ats are right here as well. So make sure to check us out. I'm sure we'll be. Well, I know I'm going to be tweeting my predictions after these LCK games this week.
yeah,
So yeah,
100%.
thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening, guys. We will speak to you next week.